The council chamber floated in the darkness of space like a massive crystal bubble. Inside, Ambassador Robert Hayes stood perfectly still while 47 alien species decided humanity's fate. His face showed nothing but his heart pounded against his ribs. 83 years. That's how long humans had been part of this galactic council. 83 years of proving themselves, of following every rule, of being the junior members who smiled and nodded and tried so hard to belong. Admiral Catherine Mills stood beside Robert, her military uniform crisp and perfect. Her hand rested near her weapon, not touching it but close enough. She had fought in 3 wars to protect council space. She had bled for these people. Chancellor Valoris rose from his seat. His body was made of living crystal that sparkled in the starlight. He was beautiful and cold, like a statue carved from ice. The human proposal is rejected, Valoris announced. His voice echoed through translation devices in every language at once. Robert had expected this. Humanity had spent 6 months preparing a defense plan against the Voidborn, the mysterious force that was eating entire star systems like a plague. The plan was good. It was brilliant, actually. But he knew they wouldn't listen. Your aggressive nature brought this threat to our galaxy, Counselor Meridax added, rising from her platform. She belonged to the Lothrian species, one of the oldest in the council. Her people had been peaceful for 3,000 years. Your wars, your weapons, your constant fighting. You painted a target on all of us. Voices rose in agreement. Dozens of species nodding, agreeing, blaming. Catherine's jaw tightened. Robert felt her anger like heat radiating from a fire. He didn't blame her. This was insane. Humanity hadn't started a single war since joining the council. They had been model citizens. We haven't fought anyone, Catherine said, her voice level but hard. Every weapon we built was for defense. Every battle we fought was to protect council worlds. Then explain the Voidborn, Meridax shot back. They appeared 20 years after you joined. 20 years. Most species here have existed in peace for millennia. That's not fair, a small voice called out. Counselor Margaret Thrace stood up, her 3 eyes wide with distress. She was Melodian, and she had always been kind to the human delegation. The humans have helped us. They saved the Krellian colonies when... Silence, Valoris commanded. Margaret sat down, but her eyes stayed on Robert, full of apology. Valoris raised one crystal arm. The chamber fell quiet. The Galactic Council has made its decision. Humanity's membership is revoked, effective immediately. The words hit like a physical blow. Robert heard Catherine suck in a sharp breath beside him. Furthermore, Valoris continued, humanity will surrender all military vessels and technology to Council authority. All humans will return to the Sol system and remain there. You have 30 days to comply. The chamber erupted. Some voices shouted in approval. Others protested, but they were few. Too few. Robert stood there, surrounded by the noise, and felt something cold settle in his chest. They had tried. For 83 years, humanity had tried to fit in, to be accepted, to be part of something bigger than themselves. And now they were being thrown away like garbage. Catherine leaned close and whispered, "Say something. Fight this." But Robert just smiled. It was a strange smile, small and knowing. He raised his hand. The gesture was so calm, so unbothered, that the chamber quieted just to see what he would do. "Understood," Robert said simply. "Humanity will comply with the Council's directive." Catherine stared at him like he had lost his mind. Margaret Thrace looked devastated. Even Valoris seemed surprised by how easily Robert accepted. "You may leave," Valoris said, waving them away dismissively. Robert turned and walked toward the exit, Catherine hurrying to keep pace. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "We can't just accept this." Robert said nothing until they reached their shuttle. Once inside, with the doors sealed and the privacy shields activated, he pulled out his personal communicator. He typed 3 words and sent them to Earth on the most secure channel humanity possessed. Protocol Exodus. Begin. Catherine read the message over his shoulder. Her eyes went wide. "Robert, what is Protocol Exodus?" He looked at her, and his smile was no longer small. It was sharp. "Dangerous. They want us gone? We'll be gone. But they're going to regret this, Catherine. Not today. Not tomorrow. But they will regret it. What are you planning?" Robert looked out the viewport at the Council station, at the gleaming monument to galactic civilization that had just rejected them. "We're going to disappear," he said quietly. "And when we come back, they won't recognize what we've become." 15 years had passed since the Council threw humanity away. 15 long years of war, death, and desperation. Counselor Margaret Thrace stood in front of a massive holographic display, staring at empty space where human colonies used to be. Her 3 eyes were tired, dimmed by years of guilt and fear. "Still nothing?" she asked. Inquisitor David Cross shook his head. He was Arkelian, like Chancellor Valoris, but unlike the Chancellor, David had begun to question everything. His crystalline body looked dull, almost gray. "Nothing," he confirmed. "Every human settlement we find is empty. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Just empty." Margaret touched the hologram, zooming in on a human trading post near the outer rim. The images showed tables still set for dinner. Lights still on. Doors unlocked. Personal belongings left behind as if people had simply stepped out for a moment and never returned. "This doesn't make sense," Margaret whispered. 60 billion humans across hundreds of colonies. Where did they go? David pulled up another image. The Sol system. Every expedition we send hits an energy barrier. Nothing gets through. No signals in. No signals out. Just silence. The Voidborn had gotten worse. Much worse. 40% of Council space was gone now, consumed by the advancing darkness. 3 entire species had been erased from existence. The Council was dying and they had finally admitted the truth. They needed humanity's help. But humanity was gone. "We tried every communication method," David said, frustration creeping into his normally calm voice. "Every frequency, every protocol, every diplomatic channel. They're not responding." "Maybe they can't," Margaret suggested, though she didn't believe it. "Or maybe they won't," David replied quietly. Margaret felt the weight of those words. She had been one of only 7 council members who voted against humanity's expulsion. 7 out of 47. The memory still burned. "I found something," David said, changing the display. In an abandoned human research facility on Titan Station. Files appeared on the screen. Most were encrypted, but some titles were visible. Margaret read them aloud. "Tick-Tock Protocol. The Long Night. Project Kronos." She looked at David. "What do these mean?" "I don't know. But every human facility has references to them. It's like they were preparing for something." "Preparing for what?" Before David could answer, alarms screamed through the investigation center. A young technician rushed in, his breathing fast and panicked. "Sirs. Deep space sensors picked up something." The main display changed, showing sensor data from the edge of explored space. Margaret's breath caught in her throat. A ship. Definitely human in origin, but the design was impossible. It looked organic, alive, with smooth curves that seemed to shift and shimmer like water. The technology was centuries beyond anything in Council records. "How long was it there?" David asked. The technician checked his data. 3.7 seconds. Then it vanished completely. Margaret leaned closer. "Where did it go?" "That's not the strange part," the technician said, his voice shaking. "Look at the timestamp from the ship's internal chronometer." David pulled up the data. His crystalline body went completely still. The chronometer read, 100 years in the future. Exactly. To the microsecond. The room fell silent. "That's impossible," Margaret breathed. "Time travel doesn't exist. It can't exist." David was staring at the data like it was a puzzle he desperately needed to solve. The humans kept talking about time during the debates. Remember? They said time was their greatest weapon. We thought they meant patience. Strategy. Margaret's mind raced back to those final meetings before the expulsion. Ambassador Robert Hayes had said something strange. What was it? "You think in centuries," she quoted, remembering suddenly. "We think in heartbeats. That's not a weakness. That's an advantage." David turned to her. "What if it wasn't a metaphor?" "What do you mean?" "What if humans really do experience time differently? What if that barrier around Sol isn't just a shield?" Margaret felt a chill run through her body. "You think they're manipulating time inside the barrier?" "I think they're buying time," David corrected. "Real time. What if for every year that passes out here, only days pass inside? Or hours?" The implications were staggering. Margaret did the math in her head. 15 years external time. If the ratio is significant enough. Her voice trailed off. "They could have had centuries," David finished. "Centuries to build. To evolve. To become something we can't even imagine." Margaret looked at the empty display where the mysterious ship had been. "And that vessel we just saw? A scout. A test. They're checking to see if we're still here. Should we try to contact them again?" David shook his head slowly. "I don't think it matters what we do. They'll reveal themselves when they're ready." And if they don't help us? David looked at her with something like sadness in his crystalline features. Then we'll die knowing we deserved it. Margaret wanted to argue but she couldn't. The council had thrown away their best chance at survival because of pride and fear. Now all they could do was wait and hope that humanity was more forgiving than they had been. Inside the barrier, Earth looked the same as it always had. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds drifting lazily across the surface. But time had become something different here. Something flexible. Dr. James Peterson stood in front of the global assembly, his hands shaking as he held up a neural scan. Outside the barrier, only 12 days had passed since humanity's expulsion. Inside it had been a full year. We're different, James said, his voice echoing through the massive chamber. Not better or worse. Just fundamentally different from every other species we've met. Admiral Catherine Mills sat in the front row, her hair now streaked with gray despite less than 2 weeks passing in the outside universe. She leaned forward, eyes sharp and focused. Show us, she commanded. James displayed brain scans side by side. Human, Archelian, Lothrian, Melodian, a dozen other species. Every other species processes time linearly. Their consciousness moves through moments like beads on a string, one after another. He highlighted the human scan. We don't. Our minds operate on quantum levels. We experience multiple moments simultaneously. We don't just observe time. We swim in it. President William Cross, a gray-haired man who had been elected specifically to lead humanity through this crisis, spoke up. Is this why the council always said we were too aggressive? Too fast. Exactly, James confirmed. To them we move like lightning. Make decisions in seconds that should take them days. It wasn't cultural. It was biological. We literally experience reality at a different speed. A young engineer named Lucy Harper raised her hand from the back. She was 23 years old, brilliant, and had been working on the barrier project since the beginning. And the barrier? She asked. James smiled. The barrier is a temporal dilation field. Right now the ratio is 30-1. For every 30 days that pass outside, 1 day passes in here. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. Catherine stood and silence fell. How long can we maintain it? If we run it for 15 years external time? James pulled up calculations. We'll have approximately 500 years subjective time inside. The weight of those words settled over everyone like snow. 500 years. President Cross spoke quietly. 500 years to prepare. To build. To evolve. He looked around the chamber. The question is, what do we become? Lucy stood up. We become what we need to be. But we have to decide now. Do we stay human or do we become something else? It was the question everyone had been afraid to ask. An older woman, Dr. Helen Price, spoke from the science section. If we integrate technology directly into our bodies, if we modify ourselves to work with temporal mechanics, are we still human? Is a person with a prosthetic leg still human? Lucy countered. Is someone with a pacemaker? A neural implant? Where's the line? This is different, Helen argued. You're talking about changing our fundamental nature. No, Catherine said, standing again. I'm a soldier. I fought in 3 wars. I've seen humanity at its worst and its best. And I can tell you that humanity isn't defined by our biology. It's defined by our spirit. Our refusal to give up. Our stubborn belief that tomorrow can be better than today. She looked around the chamber, meeting eyes. The council threw us away because they were afraid of what we could become. I say we prove them right. We become something amazing. Something they never imagined. But we stay human where it counts. She tapped her chest. In here. The vote was unanimous. Project TikTok began immediately. Humanity dove into research and development with the desperation of the condemned and the hope of the faithful. Years passed inside the barrier while mere months ticked by outside. They built ships that could skip through time like stones across water. Vessels that existed in multiple moments simultaneously, making them nearly impossible to target or destroy. They developed artificial intelligence partners that could process information across different time streams, seeing possibilities before they happened. They integrated technology into their bodies, not to become machines, but to expand what human meant. Lucy Harper became one of the first volunteers for neural enhancement. She stood in the medical bay, looking at her reflection as tiny circuits were woven into her temples. Are you afraid? The doctor asked. Terrified, Lucy admitted. But humans have always been afraid of the next step. That's never stopped us before. The procedure took 6 hours. When she woke up, the world looked different. She could see time flowing around her like a river, could feel the currents and eddies of causality. She wept at the beauty of it. Years became decades. Decades became centuries. Inside the barrier, humanity transformed. They built a partial Dyson sphere around the sun, harvesting energy on scales that would have seemed impossible before. Admiral Catherine Mills grew old watching humanity evolve. She was 541 years old when she finally lay on her deathbed, surrounded by generations that called her grandmother. Lucy Harper, now Fleet Admiral Lucy Harper, held her hand. Lucy looked 30, kept young by technology that Catherine had helped create. "It's time," Catherine whispered. "Drop the barrier. Show them what 500 years of human determination looks like." "They think only 15 years have passed," Lucy said softly. Catherine smiled, her eyes bright despite her age. "Then let's make sure they remember this day forever." She closed her eyes and slipped away peacefully. Outside, humanity's new fleet powered up. The barrier began to fall. And the galaxy was about to learn what happened when you threw away humanity's help. The barrier around Sol collapsed at exactly 9 in the morning, Galactic Standard Time. Counselor Margaret Thrace was in her office when the alarm started screaming. She was old now, her 3 eyes dimmed by 15 years of guilt and watching the Voidborn consume the galaxy piece by piece. Her hands shook as she activated the display. "What's happening?" she demanded. A technician's voice came through, high and panicked. "Sol, the barrier is down." Margaret's heart began racing. She rushed to the main observation deck where dozens of council members were already gathering. The massive viewscreen showed the Sol system in real time. And Margaret forgot how to breathe. A Dyson sphere wrapped around Earth's sun like a glittering shell, half completed but functional. It was massive beyond comprehension, harvesting the energy of an entire star. Thousands of ships filled the system. Not hundreds. Thousands. Each one looked like it had been grown rather than built, with smooth organic lines that shimmered and phased in and out of normal space. They appeared, disappeared, and reappeared somewhere else without crossing the distance between. "By the ancients," someone whispered behind her. Chancellor Valoris pushed through the crowd, his crystalline body looking old and cracked. 15 years of failure had worn him down to almost nothing. "Open a channel," he commanded, his voice hoarse. The view screen flickered. A woman appeared and Margaret gasped. She was human, clearly human but enhanced. Delicate circuits gleamed at her temples like jewelry. Her eyes held depths that seemed to see through time itself. But her smile was warm, genuinely warm. "This is Fleet Admiral Lucy Harper of the Terran Concordat," the woman said. "We understand you require assistance." Valoris stepped forward, and Margaret saw shame flash across his crystalline features. You're human?" he asked stupidly. "We are," Lucy confirmed, amusement touching her voice. "We've been busy." 15 years, Valoris said, confusion clear in his tone. "How did you build all this in 15 years? Lucy's smile turned mysterious. "Time is relative, Chancellor. But we can discuss physics later. Right now, you have a void-born problem that's consuming your civilization. We brought solutions." Within hours, human ships appeared across council space like ghosts materializing from nowhere. They brought gifts that seemed like magic. Temporal shields that could freeze void-born advances in place, locking the enemy in single moments while council fleets repositioned. Weapons that fired across multiple timelines simultaneously, erasing threats before they fully manifested. Technology that rewrote the rules of what was possible. Margaret requested a meeting with Admiral Harper personally. They met aboard a human vessel called the Long Night, a name that made Margaret shiver though she didn't know why. Lucy greeted her in a simple observation room overlooking Earth. The planet looked the same but different somehow. More vibrant. More alive. "Why?" Margaret asked without preamble. "After what we did to you, after we threw you away like trash, why are you helping us?" Lucy was quiet for a moment, looking out at her homeworld. "Do you know what happened inside that barrier, Margaret?" Lucy asked. "We detected temporal manipulation. We think you experienced more time than we did." 500 years, Lucy said softly. "While 15 years passed for you, we lived 500 years. Generations were born, lived, and died inside that barrier. We had time to think, to grow, to decide who we wanted to be." She turned to face Margaret, and her eyes were ancient despite her young face. "We could have chosen revenge. We could have let you all die. Many people argued for exactly that." Lucy's voice was gentle but firm. "But then we wouldn't be human anymore. And despite everything, despite the changes, despite the enhancements and the evolution, we're still human where it counts." "I don't understand," Margaret admitted. Humans don't abandon people in need, Margaret. Even when those people have betrayed us. That's not weakness. That's strength. It's the strength your species couldn't understand 15 years ago. Lucy smiled sadly. Maybe you'll understand it now. Tears fell from Margaret's 3 eyes. I'm so sorry. I voted against your expulsion, but I should have done more. Should have fought harder. You did what you could, Lucy said, placing a warm hand on Margaret's shoulder. And you remembered us kindly. That matters more than you know. Over the next 3 months, the combined Human Council fleet pushed back the Voidborn advance. Hope, absent for so long, began to bloom again across the galaxy. But in the command center of the Long Night, Lucy stood with her second officer, Commander Thomas Price, studying sensor data that made her blood run cold. They're adapting, she said quietly. The Voidborn are learning to counter our temporal technology. Thomas looked over the data, his enhanced mind processing it at impossible speeds. That shouldn't be possible. They're not technological. They're more like a natural force. Lucy's hands gripped the console. Understanding crashed over her like a wave. They're not from the end of time, she whispered. They're trying to become it. They want to be the final moment. The last tick of the clock. Thomas turned pale. What do we do? Lucy looked at the display showing council worlds, human worlds, billions of lives hanging in the balance. We stop them, she said simply. No matter the cost. The Voidborn came with everything they had. 2 massive waves, moving simultaneously toward council space and toward Sol itself. It was their final assault, their last attempt to consume everything. Lucy Harper stood in the command center of the Long Night, surrounded by holographic displays showing the impossible scale of the threat. Every screen showed darkness advancing, eating stars, erasing civilizations. How long until they reach us? She asked quietly. 17 hours, Commander Thomas Price replied, his voice tight with tension. Lucy took a deep breath. She had known this moment would come. Had prepared for it. But knowing and facing it were 2 different things. Activate the Chronos Array, she ordered. Thomas turned to her, his eyes wide with shock. Admiral, if we do that, we'll be separated from normal time permanently. We'll exist between seconds. Between moments. Forever. I know what it means, Thomas. There has to be another way. Lucy smiled sadly at him. There isn't. The Voidborn are trying to become the end of time itself. The only way to stop them is to remove them from time completely. And only we can do it. Her communicator crackled. Margaret Thrace's voice came through, desperate and breaking. Lucy, please don't do this. We can find another solution. I'm authorizing full council membership for humanity, complete reparations, anything you want. Just please don't sacrifice yourselves. Lucy felt warmth spread through her chest. After everything, Margaret still cared. Thank you, Margaret, for standing up for us when it mattered. For remembering us kindly. Lucy, please. Tell the council we forgive them, Lucy interrupted gently. Tell them to be better than they were. Tell them to remember what humanity taught them. What did you teach us? Margaret asked through tears. That tomorrow is worth fighting for. Always. Lucy closed the channel before Margaret could respond. She looked around the command center at her crew. Young and old, enhanced and unmodified, born on Earth and born in the depths of space. All human. Already. It's been an honor, she said simply. They nodded. No one spoke. There was nothing left to say. Lucy's hand moved to the activation control for the Chronos Array. Across the Sol system, thousands of satellites hummed to life. Reality began to bend around them like light through water. Initiating phase shift, Thomas reported, his voice steady now. We're moving out of normal time. Lucy felt it happening. Felt humanity sliding sideways through reality, becoming something that existed in all moments and no moments simultaneously. The Voidborn reached them, but humanity was no longer there to touch. Instead, humanity rewrote the equation. With careful precision, existing outside of time itself, they edited causality. They made it so the Voidborn never arrived. Never existed in this timeline. Never threatened anyone at all. The universe rippled. Reality blinked. And reset. Counselor Margaret Thrace sat in the council chamber, listening to a boring debate about shipping regulations. Something felt wrong. Like she had forgotten something important, something world-changing. She looked at the empty seat where humanity's ambassador used to sit. Tears fell from her eyes without understanding why. That evening, alone in her quarters, she stared at a clock on her wall. The second hand moved forward with perfect, steady precision. For just 1 microsecond she saw something impossible. A ship that shouldn't exist, shimmering in and out of reality. A message appeared on her personal display, letters forming from nowhere. We're still here. We always will be. Keep the clock turning. Remember us, Lucy. Then it vanished. But Margaret understood. Somehow, impossibly, she understood. She began writing that night. She called it, the Book of Human Memory. Every word Lucy had spoken. Every sacrifice humanity had made. Every lesson they had tried to teach. She would make sure the council never forgot. Years passed. Decades. Margaret grew old and eventually died, but her book survived. It became required reading for all council members. New generations learned about the species that saved them by becoming ghosts in the machine of time itself. 50 years after the reset, a young Melodian child stood with her father in a museum. They looked at a statue of a human holding back darkness with outstretched hands. Do humans still exist? The child asked. Her father looked at the clock on the museum wall. Watched the second hand tick forward, steady and eternal. Yes, he said softly. Every moment. Every second. They're there, keeping the clock turning, making sure tomorrow comes for all of us. That night the child drew a picture. A human figure standing between the numbers of a clock face, protecting the universe from the darkness beyond. She titled it, The Guardians of Tomorrow. Somewhere between seconds, existing in all moments and no moments, Lucy Harper smiled. Humanity had become something unprecedented. Something impossible. They were no longer bound by flesh or time or space. They existed in the spaces between heartbeats, in the gap between one moment and the next. They had become time's guardians. The eternal watchers. The protectors who would never sleep, never rest, never stop. The council had betrayed Earth, so humanity left. But they didn't abandon the universe. They became its heartbeat. And as long as time kept flowing forward, as long as clocks kept ticking and stars kept burning, humanity would be there. Not as conquerors. Not as victims. But as the eternal promise that no matter how dark the night, tomorrow would always come.